Order does not solve problems. Most often it just...
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being with us this afternoon for our public hearing and the rest of our Montgomery County Council meeting. The first item that we have is a public hearing on a resolution to approve the FY21 transportation fees, charges, and fares, which would be effective starting July 1st, 2020. Accept transit fares to be effective June 28th, 2020. Action is scheduled for Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the Council's consideration should do so before the close of business on April 29th. Each individual will have 2 minutes to speak. Individuals will be alerted as they approach their 2 minutes and may be disconnected. Also, there may be technical glitches, we hope not, but there could be, during the public hearing that may need to be addressed by our staff, so thanks in advance for your patience. For the first public hearing, there are no speakers. The next public hearing, agenda item number 13, the public hearing is now closed. The next public hearing, agenda item number 13, this is a public hearing on a resolution to establish the FY21 solid waste service charges to be effective July 1st, 2020. Action is tentatively scheduled for May the 13th, 2020. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the Council's consideration should do so before the close of business on April 27th. There are no speakers for this public hearing, and this public hearing is now closed. The next item, agenda item number 14, is a public hearing on a resolution to establish the base rate or equivalent residential unit for the FY21 water quality protection charge to be effective July 1st, 2020. Action is tentatively scheduled for May 13th, 2020. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the Council's consideration should do so before the close of business on April 27th. There are no speakers for this public hearing, and this public hearing is now closed. The next item, agenda item number 15, is a public hearing for the Council to receive testimony on a resolution to set the rate or an amount of a property tax credit to offset certain income tax revenues resulting from a county income tax rate higher than 2.6%. Action will be scheduled for a future date. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the Council's consideration should do so before the close of business on April 27th. There are speakers for this public hearing, and Susan Kennedy, will you please facilitate the public hearing?
Thank you, Council President Katz. We do have a couple of slight changes to this particular agenda item. Our first speaker will not be able to join us today. She is unavailable. And our third speaker will be joining us under item 17 instead. So for this public hearing, we have Edelmira Oriana speaking. And if you could say your name for the record and the organization which you represent.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Edelmira Orellana, vivo en el área de Wilton. Soy dueña de mi casa por más de 20 años. Soy miembro del proyecto cívico latino desde que se inició y continúo participando activamente en mi comunidad. El día de hoy quiero expresar mi apoyo del incremento al crédito fiscal de impuestos sobre los bienes inmuebles, ya que sería de mucho beneficio para dueños de casa como yo. También me gustaría pedirles que los impuestos que pagamos sobre nuestra propiedad se vean reflejados e invertidos en nuestras propias comunidades. Por ejemplo, en la construcción de parques, remodelaciones de la escuela de mi vecindario, Highland Elementary School, mejoramiento de nuestras calles y avenidas, más área de parqueo, que es el mayor problema que tenemos en el vecindario. Quiero agradecerle por todo el apoyo que nos están brindando. Muchísimas gracias. Gracias por su valioso tiempo. Que Dios les bendiga. Gracias.
Gracias. Interpretation, por favor. I believe we have Lillian Moss on the line. Maybe she has run into some technical difficulties. There she is.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Edelmira Orellana, and I live in Wheaton. I have been a homeowner for more than 20 years. I have been a Latino civic prayer participant since it began, and I am an active member in my community. Today, I would like to share that I am in support of the income tax offset credit increase because it will greatly benefit homeowners like me. Since we are on the topic of property taxes, I hope to see our property tax investments reflected in our communities in the form of amenities like parks, remodeled neighborhood schools, and mine is Highland Elementary School, better roads, and increased parking options, which in my neighborhood represents a great need. Finally, I would like to thank you for all your support. May God bless you.
Thank you. Council President.
I would like to add something for all the other speakers, if you allow me to do so. Para todas las otras personas que van a necesitar interpretación, si pueden leer párrafos pequeños para poder yo traducir esos párrafos después. Gracias.
Thank you. Council President Katz.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item is item number 16, and this is a public hearing on the intent to consider increasing the FY21 general fund tax rate by the constant yield tax rate. Action will be scheduled for a future date. The council will conduct a full council work sessions in April and May. Persons interested in submitting additional information should call the council office at 240-777-7900 or consult the council website for information as to when specific budgets will be considered. I understand there are speakers for this item.
Yes, our first speaker for this particular item is Lori Halverson.
Hello, President Katz and members of the County Council. Can you all hear me now?
We can.
Okay, great. I am opposing any increases in the real property tax. Increasing taxes at this fragile time in American history is abominable. When people are losing their businesses as owners and their jobs as employees, it is important to state the opinion of myself and 200 members of the Chevy Chase Women's Republican Club. Increasing taxes will drive people away from this county. While before the coronavirus, this country was in a solid economic state, we are no longer in that position. Raising taxes at this time will be the nail in the coffin for many who are on thin ice to leave this county. There are many retired women in my club, and several, even before the coronavirus, have already moved to places like Florida where they can stretch their dollars further. Mitch Daniels, president of Purdue in Indiana, stated in a video to parents and staff 2 weeks ago that there would be no raises this year for his staff. That was the right move to make, given the situation today. I wish our leaders in Montgomery County would have been so swift in their actions. Union contracts cannot be an excuse to continue any decisions made before the coronavirus pandemic. Finding new ways to intentionally support and welcome businesses in Montgomery County is the preferred action to accumulate more revenue to support the services our county has become accustomed to. I also wanted to point out that I appreciate the requirement to have this notice of this potential tax increase posted in the newspaper. As citizens, it is important that we are informed. I applaud this transparency and oppose any increase. That is why I am sending this testimony today. Without such testimony, you could have a reason to raise property taxes, stating there was no opposition. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sharon Bauer. And Ms. Bauer, if you could unmute yourself before you begin speaking.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Bauer. My husband and I have been residents of Montgomery County for many years, and my husband has a small business in the county. My testimony is to oppose this bill. I am writing to ask that you uphold your public statements and not vote for any property tax increases for the 2021 budget. There should not be any tax increases of any kind due to the coronavirus restrictions and consequences. Unfortunately, you and former council members before you have encouraged tax and spend budget and agendas that are unsustainable. The current pandemic is closing businesses. Many of these businesses will not survive and reopen. Many citizens will not have a job to go back to. New businesses will unlikely not start up in the county for the foreseeable future. Please follow the example of our governor: budget freeze, hiring freeze, and budget restrictions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Robin Ficker. Mr. Ficker, if you could please unmute yourself before you begin speaking.
I'm unmuted. Okay. Hello, fine members of the Montgomery County Council and Council Chairman Katz, formerly Maryland's finest mayor. I'm Robin Ficker, asking that you do not increase property taxes. As you may know, I've placed this question on the ballot in November to limit property tax revenue increases to the rate of inflation. I collected those signatures in 2019, last year, and set a goal of trying to collect signatures for 200 straight days. I managed to achieve that goal and collected over 10,000 of the 15,600 signatures that we turned in. The Board of Elections certified 13,520 of those signatures, over an 85% success rate. In collecting those signatures, I felt tremendous amount of support for the proposed charter amendment. The support went across racial lines, across lines of where you lived in Montgomery County, across income lines. There was very strong support for this question. Now, after this pandemic, and I believe we're in a depression economically, I believe that support for that ballot question will remain as it is, and perhaps much stronger. I urge you to look at cuts in your budget, and the cuts that you should make should be much larger than ones you anticipate today, because we're in a depression. The courts aren't even open until June. I've met many people who are hurting financially, and we don't need a property tax increase that is going to force some people out of their homes and push much housing into the unaffordable category.
Okay,
So
Mr. Ficker, we need you to wrap it up, please. We need you to wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And please do not increase these property taxes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Catherine Gajoulis.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Googlis. I'm a 40-year resident of Montgomery County with over 20 years of senior level experience in budget formulation at two large federal agencies. Now, I understand how hard it is to cut budgets, but I also know how important it is to stay fiscally responsible within available resources. Montgomery County citizens are now facing major financial challenges due to the closures and health issues caused by the coronavirus. Many have lost their jobs and seen businesses drop off dramatically. They're making hard choices between food on the table, paying their rent or mortgage, or going to the doctor. They don't have the luxury of increasing available resources. Homes in the county have become unaffordable due to property taxes, impact taxes, and recordation fees. People and businesses are moving out. Tax revenues are declining. The reaction by elected officials often when they see revenues decline is to increase taxes, further exacerbating the problem with more people and businesses moving out. It's a vicious downward cycle. The 2021 budget submitted by the county executive is unsustainable in 2021, but even more so in out years. The union contracts that take effect mid-year were not annualized and will result in huge increases in out years that revenues just can't support. The 3.1 cent supplemental tax for schools will do nothing to stop declining academic performance. The school system needs to use the COVID-19 crisis as an opportunity to rethink how they're educating students. Students in MCPS system are getting minimal instruction compared to private and parochial schools. MCPS is too top-heavy to respond in nimble ways to crisis situation. It's time for major changes, not more money. Fortunately, the county will receive $134 million from the CARE Act to offset unexpected costs from COVID-19 and a yet unknown amount from FEMA and disaster payments. I urge you to ask the executive to reevaluate the budget, taking into account savings and costs that have changed due to the COVID-19. Do some belt tightening, focus on essential services, and balance the budget based on these new projections. Please do not raise taxes of any kind. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have Dan McHugh on the line now. Mr. McHugh, you can unmute and begin your testimony.
I'm muted.
Okay, we can hear you. Go ahead, sir. Now you're muted, so go ahead and try and unmute yourself again, please.
My audio.
There
Okay.
you go.
Okay. Hi, Dan McHugh here, Rockville resident of Council District 3, Council President Katz, and the esteemed council. Thank you for this opportunity. Look, I think the main thing we need to focus on is the county council, which they said Thursday, is to put pressure on County Executive Elrich to amend his budget and take this tax increase out of the proposed budget. There was a lot of confusion from the Washington Post notice in early April among citizens when they saw that, saying that the council intended to increase taxes potentially, even though in March the council put out the letter with 8 of you saying that you intended not to support the tax increase. It definitely caused confusion and anxiety in the community, and I do ask the council for future notices to please work on a better system so there isn't so much confusion. I think it takes leadership. I put Council President Katz, I ask you to please do everything you can to talk to County Executive Elrich about amending this budget. I think he is holding the line. I think he is playing a game of politics with you guys a little bit. And those of you that have worked with him for years on the council, like Councilwoman Navarro and Mr. Rice, you guys need to talk to him. You guys know him. You've known him for years. Get him to amend this budget. This is not the time to be increasing property taxes by 4.5% on top of the 8.7% in 2016. It'll make our county less competitive during the recovery. If Prince George's County and Fairfax County and other counties don't do this, when businesses were looking for businesses to come back to Montgomery County, they might say, no way. And so this is just not a good idea right now. We can have this debate next year, and I'm sure we will, and that's fine. We'll have the debate, and we'll see if taxes need to go up or not. But during an emergency situation, I respectfully ask the council to hold the line and ask County Executive Elrich to amend his budget. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir. Council President Katz, that wraps up our testimony for agenda item 16.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President Katz. I just wanted to clarify this, but I'm going to yield to the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Chair. If I think she wanted to help to clarify to make sure that residents understand some of the confusion that Mr. McHugh mentioned in his testimony.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I wanted to just highlight a few important points. This council actually was on record. It was a letter that 8 of us signed when we were very concerned about the property tax increase that was contained in the executive's budget as it was transmitted to us. This was actually before the pandemic really hit. And part of our concern had to do with the fact that we were working very hard to promote economic development in our county and felt that we needed to work a little bit more because we understood that we needed to stimulate our economy. Of course, all of that now has been exacerbated 1,000 times more. And this particular item, it's a state requirement. This is why it's really a formality that is required by state law, given that the executive had included this particular increase, meant that it would trigger this advertisement in the local newspaper, in this case, the Washington Post. And so, yes, it has caused a lot of confusion, and we are aware. But I think that, even though I don't have a crystal ball, I think the fact that we did adopt unanimously a resolution that said that at the very least we would consider a same services budget, an FY20 same services budget, and only spend additional dollars for things that were related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope that a same services budget is feasible. We understand that there might be further cuts that will be needed and necessitated because, of course, we are all very wary of the notion that this has cost quite a very grave economic downturn. So we're doing everything possible to address that. The bottom line is that the budget is now in the council's hands. We are working also diligently with the executive, understanding that if further cuts need to be done, that he would have to send over a savings plan is what we have requested. And so we're working through this. It's very fluid. But all that to say that it is unfortunate that I think this process, as required by state law, creates such confusion. But I think you can rest assured that this council has been on record and will continue to proceed without any consideration of raising taxes, because we all understand very, very clearly, and as has been also illustrated by the relief package that we adopted, we get what's going on in our community, and raising taxes is just not something that we feel is acceptable at this moment in time. So just wanted to clarify that, and in a way apologize, because I know it's been such confusion everywhere, but that's how we were going to proceed. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you everybody for testifying.
And thank you, and I want to thank both of my colleagues who are on the Government Operations Committee for their stating this. I think this has been a confusing topic for many, many years. Before I came to Montgomery County, when I was the mayor of Gaithersburg, we also obviously had to always advertise a constant yield tax rate change. And it has always caused excitement. It has always caused confusion. And we have had several people say that perhaps the state should consider changing the way that we have to advertise this to explain it, to be transparent, but not to say it in the way that it has to be written under state law. So having said that, you've heard my colleagues. This public hearing is now closed, and we are going to go to agenda item number 17. This is a public hearing on expedited bill 1820, landlord-tenant relations, rent stabilization during emergencies. This bill would prohibit the increase of rent during and after certain declared states of emergency, prohibit certain notices to tenants, requires certain notices to tenants, and generally amend county law concerning residential and commercial landlord-tenant relations. Action is scheduled for Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. Persons wishing to submit additional material to the council's consideration should do so by the end of business today. If you would like to follow the progress of a council bill, the council website has a subscribe function. Go to the council website and use the View Council Records and Legislative Updates link to learn how. It is my understanding we have speakers for this public hearing.
Yes, thank you, Council President Katz. Our first speaker for this public hearing is Asim Nagam.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. My name is Asim Nagam, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. I'm here on behalf of the County Executive in support of Bill 1820 as initially presented, which amends Chapter 29, Landlord-tenant relations of the Montgomery County Code. The County Executive views this bill as an appropriate measure to provide critical stability to residents during the state of emergency and time of financial uncertainty. DHCA has heard from residents concerning the impact of recent rent increases, which were implemented prior to the current emergency, and from residents expressing economic hardship and uncertainty caused by the emergency. The county prioritizes support for our most at-risk residents, and this bill will complement the support of residents provided through the county's supplemental appropriation of resident support services. In the public hearing packet, the county executive proposed Amendment 1, clarifying the application of the bill to apply only to lease renewal, and Amendment 4 to prohibit late fees during and 30 days after the emergency. The county executive does not support proposed Amendment 2, permitting rent increases under the voluntary rent guideline, as it is inconsistent with the needs of residents during this emergency when incomes have been severely reduced, and any increase in rent can impact the ability of households to manage. The county executive does not support Amendment 3, authorizing DHCA to review and permit rent increases up to 5% or one-time fees in circumstances justified by financial hardship. The adverse impacts of such increases or costs would have on residents is inconsistent with the goal of the bill to maintain housing stability during and following the emergency. Also, DHCA would have difficulty determining and evaluating justification of increases based on undefined standards of financial hardship is untenable.
Mr.
staff has reviewed the bill.
Mr. Nagam, excuse me, we need you to wrap up your testimony, please.
Sure, thank you. And recommended amendments 1 and 4 and stands by ready to implement the required notices to the department's website and to update the notices when emergency expires.
Okay, thank you very much,
The
sir.
government doesn't have
Thank
the
you.
staff
Thank
and
you, sir.
resources
We have to be
support.
finished. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to Tiffany Jones, please.
Hey, Miss Tiffany.
Oops.
Hi.
Hi. Go right ahead.
My name is Tiffany Jones, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Montgomery County Community Action Board. I serve in the low-income sector of the board as representative of the Head Start Parents Policy Council. As advocates for the low-income community, the Community Action Board strongly supports Bill 1820. In Montgomery County, where the self-sufficiency standard for a family of 4 with 2 adults, 1 preschooler, and 1 school-age child is $91,252, nearly 3.5 times the federal poverty level. The current public health emergency has exacerbated many of the challenges already facing our lower-income neighbors. Many people who work in low-wage jobs without benefits are struggling to pay for basic necessities. Prosperity Now notes that 24.5% of county households do not have enough money readily available to live at the federal poverty level for just 3 months in the absence of income. These community members will benefit the most from the emergency assistance the council has already allocated, something our board greatly appreciates. As a child care provider whose own business has had to close due to the COVID-19 emergency, I know firsthand the financial hardship facing many of our neighbors. Bill 1820 takes the important step of preventing rent increases during the COVID-19 emergency. With the cost of housing already so high, our board believes the step is an absolute necessity. Even before the current emergency, 44.7% of white renters, 42% of Asian renters, 54.5% of black renters, and 62.2% of Latino renters were housing burdened. As the governing body for Head Start, our board notes that this bill would support lower-income parents in particular who are struggling the most right now. Furthermore, we know that many community members facing serious financial hardship are not eligible for the IRS economic impact payments, along with other emergency support. Stabilizing rents until the COVID-19 emergency subsides is a critical step in the effort to support vulnerable residents at this difficult time. We encourage the council to pass this bill and to continue to explore policies and programs that will provide necessary support to residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marilyn Kresge-Wolf, if you could unmute and begin your testimony.
Submitted.
Go ahead and start. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is Marilyn Kresge-Wolf. This testimony is submitted in support of expedited Bill 1820E by myself and Anna T. Lady, both residents of Montgomery County, and on behalf of Jews United for Justice, which draws on the Jewish tradition of a commitment to justice to advance campaigns to improve the lives of people in Montgomery County. God's covenant with Abraham was, I will establish a home for my people Israel, and will plant them firm so that they shall dwell secure and shall tremble no more. As Jews, we are taught that tenants' rights are just as important as landlords' rights. We have an obligation to ensure fairness in tenant-landlord law. More than 17 million Americans spend more than 50% of their income on housing and may just be 1 or 2 months away from eviction. We thank you and the county executive for your leadership and hard work, not only to protect Montgomery County residents from the immediate impacts of the current global emergency, but for your continued efforts to plan for the recovery of all of our residents. Bill 1820 will provide critical support to the over 1/3 of county residents who rent their homes by providing assurances that rent will not increase during the emergency or in a 30-day period after the emergency is lifted. This bill therefore provides some additional housing stability to vulnerable populations. Many renters are already facing reduced income and or job loss, and although the more generous unemployment compensation helps mitigate this loss, it is not available to all. We know that rent costs in Montgomery County are unaffordable for many vulnerable community members, which include people of color, people with disabilities, and undocumented workers, some of whom will not be eligible for unemployment compensation. Stabilizing rent is not rent forgiveness, but will help renters to plan for covering the bills they know about without adding to their burden. We also urge the council to reject.
Ms. Wolf,
we also urge the council to reject the proposed amendments number 2 and 3 that permit rent increases under the voluntary rent guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for listening to our testimony.
Thank you very much. Is Matt Losak on the line by chance? He is the next speaker. If you are, sir, you could unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Council President Katz and council members. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good afternoon. I will just, I don't want to echo what everybody said already. Our testimony is very clear. We oppose amendments 2 and 3. We believe that this is a public health measure, not a rent control measure. It is designed to stabilize rental housing at a time when we have a state and national emergency that requires people to stay in their homes and not transmit this terrible disease to anyone else. We are sympathetic with the landlord's need to make a profit, but at this time, everyone is hurting and everyone has to pitch in something. I think this is a temporary measure. I think it is an urgent measure, and it is a public health measure. We are seeing rent increases across Montgomery County, despite information that may have been provided by the Landlords Association and their allies. We have not seen any slowing down of these rent increases. We have seen some attempts to lower some gouging rent increases, gouging up to 39 to 59%. Some of them have been reduced, but this is not the point. The point is people should not have their rents increased in a way at all that might prompt them to have to move. We need to make things stable and understand that this is a public health emergency. I'd be happy to take any questions, but I think you understand where the Renters Alliance is coming from.
Thank you. Is Mr. Young Martin on the line? And if you are, sir, could you unmute yourself and begin your testimony?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Hyun Martin, and I want you to know that there are 135,000 rentals in Montgomery County, and that's about 34.6%. The average rent in between 2014 and 2018 was $1,742. In Tacoma Park, where there is rent stabilization, it was $1,155 at that time, and there was 47.1% rental during that time. My family moved here 9 years ago after the 2008 financial crisis and my husband's medical crisis and necrotizing fasciitis. It shifted us from a middle-class family with owner housing to going through a bankruptcy and becoming renters. My income has been affected by COVID-19, but only by a third. My husband, who is a small business consultant, has seen no income since March. Thankfully, we are able to pay our monthly rent of $18.50 and $122.50 for the monthly association fee. But this leaves very little money for the other monthly bills of internet, cable, phone, electricity, water, and sewage, and plus the cost of food, transportation, and insurances. So we are able to, with the monthly gift from my father-in-law, make our financial life work. As I'm well aware, we are fortunate during this crisis to be able to have an income. Not everyone has family that can give that type of financial support. That's why I'm testifying in favor of this Pandemic Rent Stabilization Act. There are too many families that have been affected by the shelter in place and will probably take about a decade to recover from. And I hope we as a county and country are able to figure out ways to help renters with the rental tax rebate. Or I know in Washington, D.C., we had that in the 90s. As a small business owner, I have had income and I've had to operate out of cash, so I'm so thankful I don't have a big loan or a physical commercial business location since last year. I can say that our family will continue to be able to make it in Montgomery County, but I want all families to be able to make it. So I thank you for continuing to assess. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Kolar.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Kohler, and I'm testifying on behalf of Montgomery Housing Alliance. MHA applauds and supports efforts to protect tenants, especially during our ongoing public health and economic crises. As you know, low-income renters in particular are especially vulnerable to the economic shocks resulting from the crisis. In addition to the measures included in Bill 1820, we urge the Council to allocate substantial funding for emergency rental assistance. Even with limits to rent increases, many households will struggle to meet housing costs during and after the state of emergency. Additionally, once the state's moratorium on evictions is lifted, many households will effectively be hit with balloon rent payments, but even with limits to rent increases will not have income to pay them. In order to avoid mass evictions and displacement, we urge the Council to allocate significant funds for emergency rental assistance. In addition to protecting tenants, increased rental assistance will help property owners meet operating expenses, therefore preventing default and allowing for adequate maintenance of properties. We also urge the Council to include an exemption for units covered by income-determined rental assistance contracts. In these properties, such as buildings with federal housing assistance payment contracts, tenants pay a portion of a contract rent consistent with their incomes, while administering agencies pay the remainder. In these situations, a marginal increase in rent will not be paid by the tenant. Instead, it will be paid by the administering agency. Annual rent increases are an important part of long-term asset management plans for these income-restricted properties. Again, we support the Council's efforts to protect tenants, but urge that in addition to regulatory measures, you allocate supplemental resources for rental assistance in order to ensure two things. One, that while regulatory protections are in place, property owners have the cash flow they need in order to avoid default and properly maintain buildings. And two, that after regulatory measures expire, renter households can access resources to pay rent and stay in their homes despite the longer-term economic impacts they may face. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this input.
Thank you very much. Nicola Whiteman.
Members are deeply. Do I need to start again?
Yes,
our AFA members are deeply committed to working with many residents impacted by COVID-19 as we work together during this crisis. Already our data shows that a significant percentage of residents across our Maryland portfolio are unable to pay their rent, and numbers that we expect to increase significantly beginning in May. As an update to an earlier survey of 74 companies reporting, 35% of respondents indicated that some percentage of residents proactively asked for some form of rent relief, and 20% of respondents are reporting that 10 to 49% of residents requested rent relief. And then 20% of respondents reported that 10 to 40% of residents had not paid their rent at the time of the survey, with at least two saying that 50 to 59% of residents had not paid rent. As AFA has previously shared, members are continuing to identify ways to respond to the needs of our residents impacted by COVID-19, which includes, for example, suspending rent increases, waiving late fees. For those increases that were noticed, because notices require 90 days that were noticed for February and March, for example, those have been rolled back. So the increases that may have been proposed have not been implemented. As noted in our April 1st letter, the ability of housing providers to collect and residents to pay rent remains uncertain for the future. So despite an uncertain future, we are one community and will continue to work with the council as we work together through this crisis. As to the specific proposed amendments on the bill, consistent with the comments, we propose striking the reference to rent stabilization and renaming the bill the Landlord-tenant Relations COVID-19 Public Health Emergency. Relief from rent increases. AOBRA supports amendments 2 and 3 as fair and balanced, coupled with, including, for example, the hardship exemption. Notably, we think it's important for DHCA to engage in outreach to small housing providers, as those housing providers are going to be the ones that are even significantly impacted by this crisis. In addition, we propose that DHCA must also provide notice to landlords and tenants, again, with landlords being the concern being smaller landlords, and issue public announcements about the requirements so that we can ensure compliance with the law after adoption. We applaud the effort by this council. Applaud the council's effort to support proposed $2 million for emergency rental assistance. That is the critical remedy that's going to help with residents and stabilize communities during this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Amaryllis Castellon Vargas. If you could unmute and begin your testimony, please.
Señora Amarilis Castellón, es su momento de hablar. Le puede quitar el mute al teléfono, por favor.
Sí. Buenas tardes, miembros del Consejo. Gracias por la oportunidad que se me ha brindado para ofrecer mi testimonio. Mi nombre es Amarilis Castellón.
Amarilis, ¿me da un momentito para...?
Sí, claro.
Diga frases cortas y de ahí yo la tengo.
Okay.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for allowing me to offer my testimony.
Mi nombre es Amarilis Castellón.
My name is Amarilis Castellón.
Soy madre de familia de la escuela John Lelek Elementary School.
My children are students at the John Lelek Elementary School.
Y participo de las clases cívicas que se brindan en esta escuela.
And I participate in the civic classes offered at this school.
Gracias por ofrecer estas clases en el área donde vivo, ya que son muy educativas y lo que mi comunidad necesita.
Thank you for offering these classes in my area of the county. They are very helpful and something our community needed.
Yo he vivido en el complejo de apartamentos Northwest Park en Silver Spring por más de 5 años.
I have lived in the Northwest Park Apartments Complex in Silver Spring for over 5 years.
El día viernes recibí una carta de la oficina de renta informándome que me incrementarán el costo de la renta de $1,581 a $1,641 en los próximos 3 meses.
Last Friday, I received a letter from the rental office informing me that my rent will increase from $1,581 to $1,641 in the next 3 months.
Es un apartamento de 2 habitaciones. Económicamente ya no podemos continuar viviendo en estos apartamentos porque cada año suben los costos y nuestros ingresos son muy bajos.
It is a 2-bedroom apartment, and financially we can no longer continue living in these apartments because every year they raise their prices while our income continues to be low.
Por esa razón hemos decidido mudarnos a otros apartamentos más baratos. Informé a la administración por 2 meses de anticipación, como lo requiere la ley.
And for this reason, we have decided to move to another and cheaper apartment. I gave my 2-month notice as required by law. However, they told me.
Pero me han dicho que tengo que pagar $500 para poder dejar el apartamento. Yo sé que ustedes han promovido leyes que nos ayudan a los inquilinos.
They told me that I have to pay an additional $500 to be able to leave the apartment. I know that you have approved laws to help tenants.
Por eso es que han visto cambios, pero necesitamos más de su ayuda. Por esta razón doy mi apoyo.
And that's why we have seen some changes, but we need further help from you. And for this reason, I give my full support.
En su totalidad, a la medida del concejal Will Yowando de no incrementar el costo de la renta durante estos momentos de emergencia?
I give my full support to Council Members Will Jowando's proposed bill to freeze rent during emergencies.
Porque sé que nos ayudará mucho. Agradezco su tiempo y todo lo que hacen por ayudar a los que más lo necesitamos. Muchas gracias.
Because I know it will help us a lot during this period of emergency and uncertainty. I appreciate your time and everything you do to help those in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Stephen Melkithian. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Katz and council members. My name is Steve Melkithian. I'm an East Bethesda homeowner and a Kensington small business owner. Even in the best of times, working-class residential renters are challenged to find housing that might check some of the boxes of affordability, size, closeness to work, school, shopping, and childcare in one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. Many of our neighbors who rent are the heroes who are still going out to work every day at grave risk, driving the buses and delivery trucks, staffing the hospitals and elder care facilities, stocking the shelves with food and medicine, keeping our infrastructure functioning, moving the mail, and performing the other essential labors that sustain our lives. Please support Bill 1820 to stabilize residential rents during the COVID-19 crisis. We owe our neighbors at least this much relief and really a whole lot more. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, sir. Our last speaker on this public hearing is Mayra Alvarado.
Señora Mayra Alvarado, es su momento de hablar.
Sí, gracias. Buenas tardes, miembros del Consejo.
Good afternoon, members of the County Council.
Quiero agradecer por la oportunidad que me dan. Mi nombre es Mayra Alvarado, vivo en la 48 Benji Court en la ciudad de Gathersburg.
I would like to thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mayra Alvarado and I live in Gathersburg.
Soy madre de la escuela Washington Grove y estoy participando en las clases cívicas con la señora Mayra. Se me olvida el apellido.
Okay, yo le traduzco esto. I am a mom with children who attend to Washington Grove Elementary School, and I am a participant in the civic classes with Mrs. Mayra Cruz.
Gracias al concejal Navarro por su iniciativa y al resto de los concejales por atendernos a las escuelas de nuestra ciudad.
Thank you, Council Member Navarro, for your initiative, and to the rest of the council members for allowing us to have these classes.
Sí, desafortunadamente yo rento en esta casa. En septiembre me mudé, pasé a 12 años viviendo en apartamentos, en la cual me fue muy mal, tuve muchos problemas, pero...
I've been living in 12 años, me dijo, señora?
Sí.
I moved to this house 12 years ago. I was living in apartments, but I had very bad experiences.
Sí, como le digo, yo rento en esta casa desde septiembre del 2019, pero tengo familiares que serán beneficiados con el incremento de este crédito y será de mucha ayuda para ellos.
Deme un segundito. So I would like to correct myself. She's been renting this house since September of 2019, and she was previously living in apartments, and she had very bad experiences. She is supporting this bill because she believes it will help many members of her family.
Así que yo estoy aquí también apoyándoles a los concejales y también aprovecho para pedirles también que consideren mi situación, la misma medida que se implementarán a los inquilinos de rentas en los apartamentos, también que incluyan a los que rentamos townhouse o casas.
And I would like to ask council members to support people like me, and so you can include people who rent houses and townhouses.
Así que esa es nomás mi petición y muchas gracias por todo lo que están haciendo por nuestra comunidad y por mantenernos informados.
That's all I have to ask. I really appreciate all the work that you are doing for our community and for keeping us informed.
informarnos con las noticias de estos tiempos que donde estamos afectados con el coronavirus.
With all the news that are taking place now that we are being affected with coronavirus.
Dios me los bendiga a todos y gracias por su tiempo.
May God bless you all and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. That wraps up this public hearing, Council President Katz.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jawando.
Hi, I hope Miss Alvarado is still with us. Is she still on the line, Lillian, or did she hang up?
She's still there.
Okay.
Señora Mayra, ¿se encuentra ahí todavía?
Great. Okay, hopefully she can hear. If not, they'll see. I just wanted to thank everyone for their testimony. Okay, there you go. I see you there. I just wanted to answer you directly because you asked this. The bill does include all residential rentals, which would include townhomes and single family. So I just wanted you to know that, and getting the word out on that, hopefully it passes. Getting the word out on that will be important. Thank you.
Señora Mayra, el concejal Will Jowando le quisiese reafirmar que la propuesta de ley incluye las personas que rentan casas y townhouses también.
Oh, ok, muchas gracias entonces. Sigamos adelante entonces.
Thank you very much. Keep going.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's all I had to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This closes this public hearing. The next item, agenda item number 18, is a public hearing on expedited bill 2320, contracts, management, and disposal of goods emergency procedures. This bill would authorize the disposal of certain goods received in response to a declared emergency without competition, require the disposal of goods in a declared emergency in accordance with an emergency procedures and prioritization guidelines established by the public official declaring the emergency or the executive and generally amending the management and disposal of goods by the county. Action is scheduled later in this meeting. There are no speakers for this public hearing, and this public hearing is now closed. The next item, agenda item number 19. This is a public hearing on a special appropriation to the county government's FY20 operating budget for the Department of Finance in the amount of $5 million for the Economic Development Fund Public Health Emergency Grant Program. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing, and there are speakers for this public hearing.
Yes, that's correct. Our first speaker for this public hearing is Devin Haywood.
Hi, good afternoon, County Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Devin Haywood. I'm from Gaithersburg, Maryland. The organization I'm representing is Daddy Baby Emergency Management Services with the Community Advocate Institute. I am the CEO, founder, and president. And currently, I've applied for the 501c3 status, so I'm just waiting for it to get granted by the IRS through the mail. And all donations of time, talent, treasure, and trade are requested as well on Cash App, which is 143 Daddy Baby. So to begin with my story, I'm a 26-year-old father of 3 children who grew up in Montgomery County, Germantown, Maryland, and graduated from Quince Orchard High School in 2012 as a parent and scholar athlete who became a father at 15. I have always excelled in sports and had a desire to teach people through sports, so becoming a teenage father and raising a child while still trying to figure out my life was pretty difficult to say the least. Raised by a single mother, I grew up without a consistent father and caused a major impact on my well-being and identity development. In 2015, I got into trouble with a few friends and as a result was arrested and served 5 months in Montgomery County Correctional Facility. While incarcerated, my second child was born, and feeling of not being present made me emotionally hurt. I decided at that moment I would not go back to that lifestyle and had previously chosen that I would never end up in a jail cell again. Facing reality, I contemplated how I was going to move forward with this new vision for my life and came up with a movement called Daddy Baby. We are a nonprofit organization designed towards fathers for emergency management services to help enable and allow them to restore their relationships between their children, their families, and their communities. We believe Daddy Baby based standard operating procedures are built upon the principles of advancing our fathers, children, and communities, using education in both the standard disciplines and now prepared readiness disciplines to overcome the current issues surrounding our communities and people of color, which currently have the highest disparities over any other nationality of population in America today.
Mr. Haywood, I'm sorry, you need to wrap it up. We're at 2:20.
Yes. All
Sorry.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Currently, we are asking for all volunteers to donate their time via Cash App 143 Daddy Baby, and time, talent, trade, and service to retrofit and remodel, this community so that we can save our families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Marilyn Balcom.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. Thank you for your service during this very trying time. My name is Marilyn Balcom. I'm the President and CEO of the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. I try to do something new every day, and today this phone testimony is it. The Chamber supports the $5 million special appropriation to increase funding for restaurants and retail through the Public Health Emergency Grant Program. Restaurants and retail establishments were among the first industries hit, and they need additional support. I participate in the daily Zoom meetings with the administrators of the grant, and it's increasingly apparent that the initial $20 million appropriation is not sufficient. As of this morning, there were over 5,500 applications within the first 6 days. Depending on the average award, the emergency grant funds will be depleted with only a small percentage of applicants receiving funds. The fatal flaw of the existing program as it's structured is that it only applies to businesses with a 50% loss in the month of March. By the time businesses can demonstrate losses for April, May, and beyond, the funds will be depleted. Adding the additional $5 million is necessary, but not sufficient. I realize that the $25 million grant fund is a lot of money, especially during this time of uncertain tax revenue, but it will not go far enough. The current funds will be given to a very small sliver of businesses, leaving the majority of businesses struggling to survive. We will need a second wave of financial support for businesses, not only to keep people employed, but to get our local economy back on track. I ask you to not only approve the current $5 million additional appropriation, but to begin to think about the next round of funding to help support our small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council President Katz, that wraps up our speakers for this public hearing.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I wanted to thank everybody for working so diligently and so quickly to respond to the effects of this pandemic. This is yet one more step. These additional $5 million are added to the original $20 million. As everybody recalls, when we adopted that particular bill that created that package on March 31st, there was a lot of debate about whether we should carve out additional for restaurants and retail, and we decided that we would go ahead with a $5 million carve out at that time, but that we would reconsider the issue and then come back with some additional dollars. So this is what we're doing today. We recognize, as the last speaker said, that of course this is not enough, and we understand that the federal government has particular resources that are being allocated, the state as well, and even at that level it has not been enough. Here at the local level, we're doing everything we can within our range of resources. Obviously, we wish we had, a lot more money, but we understand that this all has to fit together. I think we also recognize that restaurants and small retail has been hit disproportionately in a negative way because, of course, when you started talking about social distancing and those directives began to be implemented, these were some of the first type of businesses that were affected immediately. So this additional $5 million, again, is part of this broader grant program. It is for restaurants and it is for front-facing retail. Really appreciate the work that Councilmember Hucker, Albornoz, so really everybody has put into specifically figuring out how do we best target many of these resources. But I don't think any of us are confused that we need to probably come back in a much more holistic way and figure out how we leverage those federal and state dollars as we try to mitigate this unprecedented impact on our small businesses. So again, thank you everybody for the support and we shall continue this conversation obviously on so many different fronts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Giwando.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to commend Councilmember Navarro for her leadership on this initiative. I think, as you stated, of our many businesses that are hurting, the restaurant industry and small retail are struggling greatly. This will help. We need federal and state action. It's good to see that there's some additional money, it looks like, on Capitol Hill coming into the PPP program and other things in other areas, but we need to do more. It's East County local restaurant day, so I'm sure Councilmember Navarro and I, at least, maybe Councilmember Hucker, will be going out tonight and highlighting some of our great small businesses in the eastern part of the county. I wanted to mention and thank Mrs. Balcom for her testimony and also thank Mr. Haywood. Mr. Haywood is a part of the Community Action Board advocacy training, and I got to do all of him and his fellow cohort wrote 3-minute testimony, which is why he probably went long, because the rules are normally 3 minutes. And I was honored to be able to be their guinea pig and test it out on them a few Saturdays ago before this all went the way it did. And many of them aren't going to get to testify now, but I wanted to acknowledge the work that they put in. They did a great job, and I'm glad Mr. Haywood was able to get through and offer his testimony. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to Councilmember Navarro for her leadership in putting this supplemental additional funding for restaurants and retail forward, building on the $20 million that we put forward as a council as part of our initial package. The 50% challenge, I just did want to note that is something that we have heard from others, is based on the county executive's emergency regulations, something that the county executive has mentioned as a concern he has as well of his own regulations. I'll be speaking with him later today to discuss some options for that moving forward based on some conversations that council members and the county executive have already had on that issue as we look forward to the next round of funding. And I just think that it's important that we can continue to do it. As Councilmember Giwando mentioned, for those of us who are not multitasking on Twitter and elsewhere, it looks like the Senate has passed over $300 billion dollars for the next tranche of the PPP to recognize the fact that their commitment was not close to the needs that were in the community. I think at every level of government, we recognize that what we put forward to begin this process is not sufficient to meet the dramatic, unprecedented challenges that we currently face. And so this is going to be part of a broader holistic view, as Councilmember Navarro mentioned, of our council continuing to build upon the unprecedented actions that we have taken, recognizing that it was a first step, but not the only step needed to help us get through this at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level.
Thank you. This closes this public hearing. This is an action item. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Navarro. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by, who was that? Councilmember.
You can give it to Rice.
Oh,
give it to Rice.
Councilmember Giwando. I couldn't see where the sound was coming from. It's been moved by Councilmember Navarro, seconded by Councilmember Giwando. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item, agenda item number 20. This is a public hearing on a special appropriation to the county government's FY20 operating budget for the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, MCEDC, non-departmental account, NDA, in the amount of $100,000 for COVID-19 response, manufacturing personal protective equipment, also known as PPEs. It is my understanding there are no speakers for this public hearing. Is that correct, Ms. Kennedy?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. There are no speakers for this public hearing. Action is scheduled immediately following the hearing. This hearing is now closed, and it's an action item, and I believe Councilmember Reamer has would like to speak.
Well, I'd like to move the appropriation first, and then I just have some very minor language changes for the appropriation.
So you would like to? It's a motion. You've made the motion, and who would like to second?
Second.
And Councilmember Albornoz is second. Please, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Really want to thank Councilmember Albornoz and the full council for supporting this initiative. It's really a pleasure working with Councilmember Albornoz through this challenging issue. This particular program is to seed a grant fund for local businesses to produce medical equipment, PPE, things that are needed for the crisis. MCEDC has just sent us some slight revisions in language for the appropriation, and so I've emailed those around. Council staff has them, and we'll write them into the resolution. If I could summarize it, the most significant element is terming it the local production fund, rather than some other language. So I believe I need to move the amended language. So I move the amended language that has been emailed around and that council staff has as well as an amendment to this appropriation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We're voting on the amendment. All those in favor, I see no speakers. All those in favor, please raise your hand to the amendment. That carries unanimously. And now we have a motion by Councilmember Reamer and a second by Councilmember Albornoz on the bill itself. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Same. It carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much. The next item that we have is agenda item number 21, and this is a public hearing on a special appropriation to the county government's FY20 operating budget in the amount of $250,000 for purchase of face coverings and other personal protective equipment. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. Ms. Kennedy, are there no speakers for this one as well? Is that correct?
No, we do have two speakers.
Two speakers.
Yes.
Please conduct that public hearing.
Okay, first we have Martha Leiva. If you could please unmute your microphone and begin your testimony.
Señora Marta Leiva, este es un momento de hablar. Le puede quitar el mute a su teléfono, por favor.
Sí, muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes, honorables miembros del Consejo.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the council. Continúa.
Mi nombre es Marta Leiva y vivo en la ciudad de Gettysburg.
My name is Martha Leiva and I live in Gettysburg.
Yo participo en el programa de Linkages to Learning de la Escuela de Washington Grove.
I am a participant in the Linkages to Learning program at Washington Grove School.
Actualmente estoy participando de las clases cívicas.
I am currently participating in the civic classes.
Gracias, miembros del Consejo, por extender este programa.
And I would like to thank council members, all council members, for extending this program.
Quisiera agradecer la propuesta de que se aprueben fondos para proveer a las familias.
I would like to thank for the propose of funding for the purchase. ¿Fondos para qué, señora Marta?
Fondos para proveer a las familias con equipo de protección
okay.
Para evitar el contagio.
Okay. I would like to support the proposed funding for the purchase of personal protective equipment.
Ya para los contagiados de coronavirus, como guantes y máscaras.
to prevent people from being infected from coronavirus, like masks and gloves.
Quizás pudiese parecer irreal, pero hay familias que solo tienen un par de zapatos y sería bueno que como medida de protección se puedan proveer bolsas desechables para zapatos para ser usadas.
It may seem unreal, but there are several families that only have one pair of shoes, and it will be good if the disposable shoe bags could be provided as well.
Por lo menos cuando las personas regresen a su casa.
So they can at least use them as protective measure when they come back to their houses and are inside their houses.
También me gustaría pedirles que distribuyan equipo de protección en los establecimientos públicos.
I would also like to ask you to distribute protective equipment in public establishments,
como supermercados y a los usuarios del transporte público como metro y buses.
such as grocery stores and for public transportation users, like those who use metro and bus.
Considero que solo unidos, todos como comunidad y gobierno, saldremos adelante.
I believe that we all united as community and government will be able to move forward.
Nuevamente, muchas gracias por mantenernos protegidos y con excelentes medidas de seguridad.
Thanks
Gracias
again.
por su tiempo.
Thanks again for keeping us safe and implemented excellent security measures. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our last speaker for this public hearing is Diana Godoy.
Señora Diana Godoy, es un momento de hablar.
Ok. Muy buenas tardes, miembros del Consejo del Condado, estimado presidente Philip Kraft. Gracias por la oportunidad que se me ha brindado para dar un testimonio de en estos tiempos tan difíciles en los que estamos viviendo.
Good afternoon, members of the council and esteemed council president Sidney Katz. Thank you for the opportunity to give my testimony during these difficult times that we are living in.
Mi nombre es Diana Godoy, vivo en la ciudad de Gatesburg. Mis hijos asisten a la escuela Washington Grove Elementary School y estuve participando en las clases cívicas gracias a la concejal Navarro por su iniciativa y al resto de los concejales por la expansión de esta iniciativa.
My name is Diana Godoy and I live in Gatesburg. My children attend to Washington Grove Elementary School and I participated in the civic lessons given at that school. Thank you, Council Member Navarro, for this initiative and to the rest of the council members for supporting its expansion.
Estoy testificando en apoyo a la asignación especial para la cobertura facial de las mascarillas y otro equipo de protección como los guantes. Esto vendría a evitar que se continúe la propagación del coronavirus en nuestro condado.
Okay. I am testifying in favor of the special appropriation for purchasing face coverings and other personal protective equipment. This is important because it will prevent the spread of COVID-19 in the county.
Quisiera también sugerir que se continúe la campaña educativa sobre la importancia que es el uso de estos materiales de protección, sobre todo en nuestra comunidad latina inmigrante, y que se haga conciencia del depósito de estos en mascarillas y guantes en basureros asignados para evitar también el mismo contagio.
Okay, I would like to suggest that the county continues aggressively doing PSAs and sharing the importance of using face coverings in the immigrant and Latino community. I would like to add that it is important to highlight the proper disposal of used face masks and gloves.
También es de mucha importancia que este equipo de protección sea repartido en áreas del condado que muestran mayor número de contagios de infectados estos códigos postales que deben de ser de prioridad, no obstante hacerlo en todo el condado, si es posible.
Okay. It is also extremely important that face coverings are distributed in areas of the county where we have the most infections. Those zip codes should be prioritized, but also consider the rest of the county.
Esta medida también vendría a ayudar a estas familias que estamos comprando mascarillas y guantes a muy altos costos y que la mayoría de nosotros no tenemos el acceso porque hemos perdido trabajos o nos han recortado horas.
Okay, so this face covering measure will allow a lot of families like mine and those who are not working or have lost their jobs or their hours have been reduced to have access to protection.
Muchas gracias por su atención y gracias por el apoyo a nuestra comunidad, ante todo a nuestra comunidad latina en esta situación tan grave. Muchísimas gracias, que tengan feliz tarde y que Dios les bendiga.
Thank you for your support and for all the help that you're giving to the Latino community during these hard times. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Thank you very much. And that is all for this public hearing, Council President Katz, but I do believe we skipped over somebody for the emergency appropriation. My apologies to Netta Squires, who is still on the line if you'd like to say a couple of words, but we will also be receiving your written testimony, so the council members will have that as well. I'm sorry, Ms. Squires, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it, and I apologize. We must not have done something correct. Good afternoon, Council Chair Katz and the honorable council members. My name is Netta Squires. I am a senior law and policy analyst for the University of Maryland, Baltimore Law School Center for Health and Homeland Security, and detailed to the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security as an emergency preparedness specialist. In 2016, I wrote the county's volunteer donations management plan and have been leading the emergency support function 16 volunteer and donations management for the county during this response. I'm here in support of Expedited Bill 2320, Contract Management and Disposal of Goods Emergency Procedures. During large-scale disasters such as the current COVID-19 pandemic, the public relies on the county to process donations in an effective manner to enhance response and recovery efforts. The existing law hampers the county's abilities to distribute donations in an appropriate manner. Montgomery County Code Section 11B44 requires the county to bid out any surplus of goods, like donations it receives, in a competitive process, with the exception that they are given to a public entity. Under the current law, the donations that the county receives could not be given to nonprofit organizations or private entities, such as hospitals, for example. Using the current response as an example, relying on the public's donations like personal protective equipment, PPE like N95, gloves, and gowns is not only valuable, but is quite literally life-saving. Our frontline providers in hospitals, nursing homes, and the food industry and other high-risk and front-facing environments are in desperate need of PPE, and most of these organizations are not a public entity. Amending the current law as it stands is imperative to allow the county to allocate donations and to where they're most needed in an effective manner during a declared emergency. I ask that the committee provide a favorable report on Expedited Bill 2320, and I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership during these challenging times, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Katz, please unmute yourself.
Is that everyone for the agenda item 18 for 2320? Did we get all the speakers now for that one?
We will see. I had nobody on my list, but if there is, I think that would be it, sir.
Okay. And for agenda item 21, are all the speakers complete?
Yes, sir. We are finished with that.
Very good. Well, thank you. And Councilmember Navarro, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wanted to express my appreciation to Ms. Leiva and Ms. Godoy for coming forth and testifying. I think it is a testament to the amazing work of Mayra Cruz Solis, who has now expanded the Latino Civic Project around the county. It's something that we launched in my office in 2011, and now felt that it was important to begin to expand it. I think that, especially during these times of crises, it is so important to work very closely with all segments of our community and be able to hear directly from them what it is that it's affecting them and what it is that they believe we should do. I also believe that these will be, obviously, they already are amazing community leaders. So I wanted to express my appreciation. It is the first time that many of them have ever testified on any issue, and I have to commend them. La señora Leiva y la señora Godoy, muchísimas gracias por venir a dar testimonio. Realmente me siento muy orgullosa de todo el esfuerzo y sabemos que durante estos momentos tan difíciles es tan importante que líderes como ustedes estén dándonos ese tipo de información, dándonos su opinión, pero también ayudando a la comunidad, porque en este momento estamos todos juntos tratando de enfrentar esta crisis. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I would also really like to thank the speakers who came out and thank Councilmember Navarro for her work over the years to strengthen the civic participation of all communities and especially the immigrant community in this county. I thought it was really terrific to see testimony across a range of issues. I think, we often, that project has often brought us speakers on, the budget or, some of the big headline issues, but this was a little different, and it shows, I think, some breadth that is exciting, but also perhaps, I don't know, if the online format makes it easier, I don't know. But that was really nice. And I wanted to say to our speakers who testified that, the needs that you articulated are the reason why the appropriation is before us today. We know that there are many community members who struggle to access food and adequate clothing and shelter, and the need for a face covering is just yet another something that they will have trouble to acquire. So these funds will enable us the county to purchase them and then distribute them through networks that will reach, hopefully, into your community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an action item. This public hearing is obviously now closed. This is an action item. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's moved by Councilmember Reamer. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Hold on one second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by raising your hand. Opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you very much. This concludes our public hearings. I'd like to publicly thank all my colleagues as well as the public on working with us on this. This is obviously not our usual. This is something that we're trying our best to perfect, but obviously it's not perfect, but we're trying our best to get there. The next item that we have is an interview, and it's for the county executive's appointee as Chief of Aging and Disability Department of Health and Human Services, Odile Brunito. Action is scheduled for later this afternoon. So if Ms. Brunito is on the line.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Odile Brunito. Thank you so much for making this possible for me and you all to have a conversation this afternoon. I just want to confirm that the sound is working well for all of you.
Well, thank you. And I did want to say hello to Dr. Raymond Crowell, who's the head of the department that you work for, from Health and Human Services. Dr. Crowell, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Ms. Brunito, we have a series of formal questions, and then my colleagues might ask some questions beyond that as well. But if you would please tell us about your professional background and how it relates to the specific responsibilities of Aging and Disability Services.
Thank you so very much for your first question. My professional background started because of a family situation that I grew up with at home back in Europe. I had several cousins with disabilities. One of them was younger than me and he was blind, and another person had a traumatic brain injury. And so in many family gatherings and situations, I enjoyed interacting with them, doing things with them, and that motivated me upon graduating from high school to study special education. And so once I completed that, my first job was to be a group home counselor working for persons with developmental disabilities. Now we call those staff person who are so dedicated direct support providers. I also worked later on in a psychiatric hospital, and that was back in Europe. Then I immigrated to the United States in 1977. My first position here was to work as a housekeeper in a family, and the family had 4 children, and one of them had a developmental disability. So I continued to help the family while I was learning English. And then I was very fortunate to be able to go back to graduate school and complete my doctoral degree in special education. And then I started to work for different county governments, first in Fairfax County, Virginia, with their developmental disability services. And then I came to work for Montgomery County. I was very fortunate to work in the Department of Family Resources. That was before HHS was created. My department director was Chuck Short. My supervisor was Joanna Clark. And my first job with Montgomery County was to take care of persons who are homeless via our network of homeless services providers and food kitchen. And then several positions later, I was working again with the Developmental Disability Network here in the county with our group home providers, our vocational providers. And then the Department of Health and Human Services was created. And at that point, of course, Chuck Short was our director, and a new service area was created called Aging and Disability Services. So at that point, our chief for Aging and Disability Services was Dr. Jay Kenny, and he was our chief for over 20 years. And I was working very closely with Dr. Kenny on anything matter to budget and contracts for Aging and Disability Services. And that obviously included all of the providers for services for persons with developmental disabilities, as well as services for older adults and their caregivers. After 11 years, I was able to have a promotion, and I became the Chief of Aging and Disability Services in Arlington County, Virginia. And I was working in a similar position as what Chief of Aging and Disability here is in Montgomery County. During that time also, we had a vacancy in Arlington County in a other service area that was called Economic Development. And so I was asked to serve as an acting chief in addition to Aging and Disability for housing services, Section 8 certificate, eligibility for food stamps, etc. And so that really enabled me to learn a lot more and add some more skills. Then I had the good fortune to come back to Montgomery County, and I have been serving as the director of Area Agency on Aging for over 10 years. And then when my wonderful chief, Dr. Jay Kenny, retired, I was asked to serve as an acting chief for Aging and Disability Services, which I have done for a year and a half. So that is my background.
Thank you. Please explain your understanding of this role as it relates to the council.
Thank you, sir. So over the years that I have been working in the county, obviously I have the privilege of working closely with my service chief, department director, as well as OMB and HHS staff and council staff as we discuss different needs and challenging issues for persons with disabilities, older adults, their families, provider agencies in our community. I clearly have learned a lot from from my superiors, my department director, my chief, in observing and being mentored in interaction with council members and council staff. Obviously, as you know very well, Aging and Disability Services has 4 very involved commissions, and the work of the commissions is conveyed on a regular basis to members of the county council. So I have a full understanding of the very important role that the commissions play in communicating regularly with the county council. So my role is to represent Aging and Disability Services and communicate with the council members on matters that are critical and are pertinent to the health and wellness of people with disabilities, older adults, their families within our community, and our staff. In addition, we also obviously communicate regularly with the staff from the Office of Legislative Oversight. They provide wonderful report on very substantive issues, and so we collaborate with all the staff on a regular basis. Clearly, I have worked more closely over the past 18 months with the HHS Committee of the County Council, and recently I really enjoyed the fact that there was a joint committee meeting between the HHS Committee and the Safety Committee, as well as the HHS Committee and the Transportation Committee. So I have been honored to work together with council staff and council members, and I look forward to continue this joint project together.
Thank you. In this time before the recent health crisis, what did you see as the most important issues facing non-disabled seniors, seniors with one or more disability, and the non-senior disability community?
Thank you, sir. Our very 3 active commissions are very engaged in advocating for the needs that they see in the community, and they work very closely with us at the staff level. And so the Commission of People with Disabilities have been focusing recently, obviously way before the COVID situation, about pedestrian safety. That has been a huge concern of theirs, and I am sure that they're going to continue to focus on that as soon as everybody is able to resume their regular activities. They also are interested in advocating for accessible ride on demand availabilities. For example, the lift rides needed to be accessible for persons who use wheelchairs. So that is something they're going to continue working on. Obviously, we have a very large plan coming from the Developmental Disability Administration. They intend to have a gigantic change in the way they deliver and reimburse for the services for our entire population of persons who are eligible for DDA services. So this is a very, very, very critical program that is going to be working on in about a year. There has been a delay that was initiated by the General Assembly because there was so many difficult issues in the implementation plan that was proposed by the state that there is a delay of a year. So we are going to be working on that as soon as we can. There is a huge need for employment for persons with developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, sensory disabilities. And obviously with the economy, it's going to be very important that we coordinate and focus on employment opportunity for persons with disabilities. We also would like to work closely with pediatricians in early identification and of course intervention for children who before the age of 2 have developmental delays. We have had some wonderful volunteers in the community who have researched this and have provided terrific recommendations to the County Council. The Commissions on Veterans Affairs continues to be very concerned about post-traumatic stress for their veterans and would like very much to focus on obviously mental health services and would like to be able to increase the ability of these services. The Veterans Affairs is extremely thankful and appreciative to the county for all of the wonderful progress in the area of housing veterans who used to be homeless. And so this is something that we clearly would like to continue to see. The Commission on Aging has multiple priorities. They do include affordable and accessible housing, expanding services for persons with early stage dementia, and also expanding the safety network for adult protective services, public guardianship, and adult foster care. So those are our Commission's focus area, which of course we work closely together. So increasing the safety net, supporting all our wonderful nonprofit providers, focusing on reducing isolation for persons with disabilities and older adults, expanding affordable housing, providing support to our caregivers for both persons with disabilities and older adults, and continuing to collaborate with our multiple partners, nonprofit, for-profit, an amazing number of volunteers who are so engaged in our community. So those are the issues that I would like to convey with you.
Thank you. The county recently passed a law on racial equity and social justice. What measures would you take to advance racial equity and social justice in aging and disability services and countywide? What changes can we make based on the lessons learned from the current health crisis?
Thank you, sir. So from our experience in the population in Montgomery County over the age of 60, we have a very diverse population. 14% of persons over the age of 60 are from an Asian background. 13% are identifying themselves as African American, and 9% are identifying themselves as Hispanic or Latino origin. And so from my experience, there are two critical factors. One is partnering with community groups, civic associations, religious groups, nonprofits, who already have wonderful relationship within those communities. We have had success, for example, with a program that's called an ambassador, with volunteers who are trained and who are trusted within the communities. For example, we have had a fantastic relationship with an Ethiopian group focusing on the need of older adults. Another wonderful success partnership with the Muslim Senior Society here in Montgomery County, with Chinese seniors, Vietnamese seniors, and we also have wonderful partnerships with the 3 minority health initiatives in HHS. HHS has a long-standing commitment for improved health outcomes for African American, Asian American, and Hispanic American. So we have very strong relationship with those groups. And again, the strategy of working with the ambassadors are extremely helpful. In aging and disability services, we have a number of staff who are bilingual, and this makes a big difference. I was recently looking at who are the bilingual staff I have that can assist during the COVID situation. And I'm pleased to let you know that I got 29 employees who are bilingual. Totally fluent in 2 languages, and that varies from Asian languages to Spanish and from the African continent. We are very aware that we have 3 zip codes in the county with a higher rate of COVID-19 positive tests, and so we are focusing on these 3 zip codes right now. Since last week, our staff is reaching out to the senior buildings in those 3 zip codes, where there is a high density, obviously, of older adults living together in an apartment complex. In these 3 zip codes, we have over 200 high-rises with older adults who reside there. So we are calling, providing them with information, hearing from them what they need to try to be as responsive as possible. Just also wanted to point out that the Commission on Aging has been very focused on the equity and social justice. They have had a series of meetings with the person who has now been appointed as the county official officer for equity and social justice. They met, and I was of course involved with that multiple times, even before this person was officially appointed. The Commission on Aging had scheduled an event in April, and obviously we had to reschedule it for later on. And so the Commission on Aging is very much committed to continue that work in the area of social equity. So this is how I would like to focus with partnering with the commissions and of course with our staff and our nonprofit agency.
Thank you.
Sure.
The Council and DHHS have been working to address some serious problems in the state systems for providing services to developmentally disabled adults. The current COVID-19 crisis has shown that there are significant issues around supporting the developmentally disability group homes appropriately, as well as providing information and services to adults with a developmental disability who are not in group homes and those who are not eligible for Developmentally Disability Act services. Do you have any observations or thoughts about how the county can better support our developmental disability residents in times of crisis?
Thank you. So I have a very good relationship with our developmental disability providers in the county, and they have been able to communicate with us very regularly, as often as needed, more than once a week, sometimes 3-4 times a week. And clearly what they need is a lot of things. The PPEs are number one. Secondly, they need increased testing, and we were so happy to hear from the governor yesterday that additional tests are going to be coming in our communities. And the developmental disability providers are also in need of getting a home set up so that those residents who have been tested positive can be together and recover from the disease without further contaminating everyone else. So they have applied for a special license with the state OHCQ, Office of Healthcare Quality, and the Developmental Disability Administration. So I have been obviously connecting with those agencies and advocating for a speedy approval of a special license for this home. The providers, of course, also need a lot of assistance in terms of infection control assessment and stabilization once a person is clinically free to return. So the state has developed or is in the process of developing teams that are similar to the strike teams for nursing home. And for the developmental disability group home, the state is calling that GO teams. So we are in the process of communicating with the state Developmental Disability Administration. I've just heard yesterday that a epidemiologist has been assigned to specifically work with the Developmental Disability Administration. His name is Dr. Kenny Feder. So we are going to be having conference calls with him tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to focus on that. Clearly, the developmental disability providers are providing essential service in the community, and they are also seeking increased reimbursement from Medicaid for hazard pay for their employees who are so dedicated and working 24/7 without able to leave the facility to go back home. And so some of the providers also are looking at the possibility of having hotel rooms close by so that their employees could go and have a good night's sleep when they cannot return home. In terms of services for persons who are not eligible for DDA, we have an amazing network of nonprofit agencies who have been working in the county for many years, and they are so committed and connecting with their members. They have this wonderful system, obviously, with Zoom nowadays, and they reach out and they do prioritize folks who do not have access to the internet because those folks clearly are more isolated. So they do extra effort with the telephone for those who are no longer connected with the phones. I am obviously increasingly partnering with my colleagues in public health, learning from them about the various protocols that the CDC has for investigating infections and controlling the spread of the virus.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. How do you think aging and disability services could be improved or made more efficient?
Thank you. One area for sure is to increase the diversity and the multiple language capacity of our staff. As our population is more and more diverse, we need to obviously be able to do the same with our staffing, so that would be definitely a goal. Continue to work with wonderful partners in those minority and ethnic groups to develop ambassador programs so that we can connect, so that people are aware of the services that they are eligible for and can be of benefit to them and their families. Working together with the physician and pediatricians to develop an early identification and intervention for children with developmental delays prior to the age of 2, which is proven to be successful. Supporting grandparents who raise their grandchildren. There was recently an article in the Post about 2 grandparents raising 2 grandchildren with autism, and obviously when there's no school, that is even more of a challenge. And we were able to provide them with respite care during this time of stress so that they could get a break and that the 2 children could have interactions with someone who is trained to work with them, for example. So we'd like to focus more on the needs of grandparents raising their grandchildren. The employment for persons with disabilities is a gigantic need. It was already very challenging before the virus, but it's going to be even more so afterwards. So we absolutely need to work more on that, as well as employment of seniors. We really would need to focus on working with businesses, developing alliances with businesses and with Worksource Montgomery to make more opportunities available to older adults. We also would like to continue greater outreach to the community, and we are very, very fortunate to have amazing volunteers engaged in our work, and so expansion on all of the volunteer activities will be absolutely a focus. You may have heard of amazing villages that we have in the county. We have close to 30 of them. They work with wonderful volunteers, and some of the activities are intergenerational in nature. We would like to expand the wonderful partnerships we have with the public schools, where older adults are trained to work with children and help them with their academics and their social skills. So those are the areas we would like to focus on, as much as well as increasing the safety net for our community, which is going to be more and more essential over the coming months.
Thank you. Do you have any conflicts of interest of which the council should be aware?
Thank you for your question. I do not. I have worked with the county for many years. I continue every year to be approved by the Ethics Commission with a disclosure, and I do not have any items to disclose. So I will be very honored to continue to serve the county in the role of Chief of Aging and Disability Services. I do have to share with you that I have a very much of a fondness of the county seal. The county seal has 2 French words on it that says "Gardez bien," and so I would be honored to serve well this wonderful community where I live and I work. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are honored to have you work for Montgomery County. And thank you for all that you have done over the years, and especially I look forward to voting for you in this position as well. The first person who wants to speak is the chair of the HHS committee, Councilmember Albernoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Odile, those were excellent responses. You hit all of the issues I was going to cover, so I'm going to limit this to just some comments. Jack Ryan, one of the former chairs of the Commission on Aging, once introduced you at a meeting by saying Odile is the greatest present from France to the United States since the Eiffel Tower. And I think he was right. You have just exhibited outstanding service for so many years now. You've learned from the best, as you talk about Chuck Short and Jay Kenny and some of the other incredible people whom you have worked with over the years. And I just have to say that the Aging and Disabilities Division is, I think, one of the most important in all of county government, because the services that they provide are so critical to developing trust, to connecting dots, to crossing over into our Department of Transportation, our Department of General Services, Recreation. You are the conduit to help facilitate and open many doors for communities that desperately need doors opened. And I would say you have big shoes to fill, but you've been filling them for a year and a half. So by now, I'd say they fit pretty well. And you are going to do an outstanding job. And I'm happy, and I see Dr. Crowell. Dr. Crowell, this is an excellent selection. And I know that you know Odile's work intimately, having worked alongside her for a number of years, and can both of us can speak in the first person about the trust that she has in communities that desperately need trust, and the respect that she has among people across not just the county, but the state as well, and will position us well to address the growing needs of both populations. Our aging population is, of course, as we know, the fastest growing demographic in the county, and our disability community is also growing rapidly, and both of those very important constituencies have undoubtedly unique sets of needs. And this council looks very forward to supporting you in your efforts, Odile, and will do what it can, whether from a budget standpoint or a fiscal standpoint or a policy standpoint, to stand up your very important work. And so I will put in a plug to make the motion when it is that time to vote for you, because of how much respect I have for you and your work and that of your team. And I will say one thing. I know we're in a hiring freeze right now, as we should be, but this is one of those divisions, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Raymond because he can't say this himself, but this is one of those divisions that cannot be bound by those restrictions. The need is so profound, and you need help. And so any positions that are currently vacant and need to be filled, or positions that need to be advanced, that it is a wise investment for us to move forward within this division to support this work, because it will not only morally be the right thing to do to support these communities, but it also is good government to support these communities proactively. So with that, Council President, I yield back to you, and I'm just so thrilled with this appointment and look forward to voting for you, Odile.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Glaze.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Odile, I'm glad you're here, wherever here may be, quite frankly, on the interwebs, I guess. But I'm glad you are before us today. And much like the chair of the HHS committee, you said everything, and I appreciate you recognizing how interwoven your work and the department's work is throughout the fabric of the community. While we might only be talking about seniors, you talked about public safety, you talked about pedestrian safety and transportation, and the collaboration there is really key. The one question I have, you started to talk about it, but I'm just gonna ask you this one question. You spoke about the 30 different villages that exist throughout the county. As we are trying to, let me rephrase this, as we face an uncertain future, economic future here in the county, organizations like the Villages, while they do get county funding to support their work, they are largely volunteer driven. How do you think we can better utilize those relationships and those networks to do the work that they need done, that we would like them to do, and given the financial uncertainty that faces us all?
Thank you so very much. And as you're aware, the Villages have been very active from the get-go. I think we started maybe 10 years ago in the county with 1 or 2, and now we have, as I said, 30. And they are led by amazing volunteers who are absolutely dynamic and dedicated. And when there is a saying that if you see a village, you see a village. Everyone is a little bit different, but obviously they all do wonderful work on behalf of the people who live in their area who need that service. Obviously, there is some groups now, because of the COVID, in many communities and neighborhoods who are amongst themselves organizing and doing amazing work to help their neighbors in need. So those are village-like organizations that are just popping up, if you wish. And so we would be very happy to work with them, to help them develop and grow if they so desire, so as to increase the number of villages even more so. Many of the village leaders organize themselves. They have regular meetings. As a matter of fact, during this crisis, every other week they have a Zoom meeting like this among all of the village leaders so that they can share, what's going on, who knows what, where can I find this and that. So this amazing infrastructure and networking is such a gift for us for the county. And so the hope is that we can continue to build upon that as soon as things settle down.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to working with you towards that goal. It takes a village. I'm glad you've been part of this village. It's been a pleasure working with you over the last 15 months or so, and I look forward to continuing to do so. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I just want to add on a personal note, my husband is part of one of the villages, and he has been very active since the get-go. So I get firsthand information, and vice versa, I give him firsthand information of what his village and the others need to know.
Pillow talk is powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brunetto. Thank you so much for your service thus far. I'm very excited about this nomination. One of the things that I would love to get your feedback as you begin your work, you mentioned the importance of hiring diverse staff and having language capacity. One of the things that I keep hearing, and I'm very interested in exploring this through our committee when we get back to some normalcy, is the challenge of hiring people that have these kinds of skill sets, given what we pay. In other words, it seems like, number one, we have very high requirements, and it's very difficult to fit into those categories, but then people who have some experience already feel like they can probably go elsewhere because they feel that we're not necessarily compensating at a level that we should. And I keep hearing this pattern of our departments having a hard time finding or hiring, I guess is really the term, people who are bilingual, bicultural, who can also have some experience. So I will be very interested in hearing your feedback as you get into this position and you make that effort, because I think we need to take a look at that a bit. It's something that, again, I've always been curious, and I've been receiving that feedback. So I would welcome that. The other piece, of course, as you mentioned, in terms of the interest and also demographic makeup of our senior population, it's been so interesting when we've done things like, for example, at the new Wheaton Library Recreation Center, when it was closed, they moved the senior program to mid-county, and then that became so popular that then when Wheaton opened and they wanted to bring it back, they said, no. But it speaks volumes to this issue of the isolation also that exists in many of our, seniors in our communities, especially when there is a language barrier, when there's a cultural barrier, and these kinds of programs are so important. So once upon a time, working with our amazing Commission on Aging, I'm going to give them a shout out because they're amazing. One of the things they advocated for was a position that would work with immigrant seniors, specifically with this issue of naturally occurring retirement communities and villages, and also trying to form those kind of networks. It would look a little different, but nonetheless, it would be so important as well. And I'm not sure where things are with that, but I'm very curious as you get into this position to see how you're able to then continue that work, especially because we know that the incidents of depression and isolation are just very widespread, especially among our immigrant senior population. So those are some of the things that I would love to work with you on, continue to work with you. And again, I think our Commission on Aging are such amazing partners. Their senior agenda is just so incredible, and I'm sure you'll be working with them very closely as well.
Great, thank you. So if I may just quickly add, the Commission on Aging for a couple of years now had advocated for a senior fellow position to be focusing on the needs of diverse seniors. So far, we have not been successful, but they are continuing to advocate for that. And as you know, the senior fellow positions are absolutely wonderful. We attract extremely talented and experienced persons to focus on problems in our county. And I want to commend the council for creating a senior fellow program yourselves for the council structure. So thank you for doing that. In terms of isolation, now that obviously everyone is forced to be isolated, one of our creative managers has developed an online program via not Zoom, but something similar to Zoom, and it's called Engage at Home. If you Google Engage at Home, you can find it. And she started that like the day after the COVID was announced. She already has 16,000 people enrolled in this. And it's via YouTube. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite place the word of it. So it is via YouTube, and it has really helped a lot of folks, be engaged. Obviously, 16,000 in just a few weeks. So we are looking forward to continuing those efforts. And as far as hiring a new staff, of course, we are always going to need to hire new staff, which is a wonderful thing, especially in these days and times. And we have partnerships with the University of Maryland School of Social Work, as well as nursing school, to try to attract people to do internships with us. And then hopefully they like us, we like them, and we can nurture them, help them out, so that then when it's time for them to graduate and want a job, that they would stay with us. So we are excited about that.
Well, that's wonderful. And as I have shared with the Commission on Aging, my very first job right after college was working at the Boone County Council on Aging, and it was doing casework with the elderly. And then I graduated into working for a nursing home in the District of Columbia as a director of volunteer services there, as well as fundraising. And so I feel like, I've covered the gamut from working with seniors and children on public policy, but it's always been something that is very close to my heart. As of course, I near also that amazing, category as a senior person myself, really also understanding that most specifically, given our aging population, there are a lot of challenges that we all need to work on. So very excited that you are stepping up into this role. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and Ms. Brunetto. It's wonderful to see you. I was looking to see if the words were on my seal here, but I thank you for translating the logo. That's our county and being in service. And thank you for your service for, one of the things, I don't know you extremely well. I've been around you a couple times. But when I looked at your qualifications, you've been helping and serving people for a very long time. And I want to thank, and you're back for more. So I always appreciate that. And thank you for doing that. 2 quick points that I just wanted to make, and you can respond. One of the things I'm extremely passionate about is intergenerational connection. And though we are isolated right now for good reason, and the health precautions we're taking to limit the spread of the virus, this is something I've worked on with my staff and want to just flag and work on with you to expand the amount of funding and programs in ways that we connect young people, particularly in our 209 schools, in a formal way with our senior population. I can't tell you, there are many programs going on, but every time I speak with a group of seniors, wherever it is, there are many people want to volunteer and they want to have that connection with young people, and vice versa. Obviously, it's a great exchange. And so I'd love to work with you on that issue. And we have great groups like InterAges and others that do this and do some of the back end work. But I think we have a large opportunity to expand, especially as we head out of this crisis. So I just wanted to flag that for you and see if there is anything you wanted to say on that issue.
Fantastic. You are absolutely right on. Every year in the county, over 9,000 persons turn 65. So if we could reach out and engage a percentage of those folks, imagine the difference it could make in our community. And the volunteer center is extremely active in connecting all the adults who want to volunteer with the needs in the community. And recently, the Volunteer Center has hired 2 part-time senior fellows who are focusing exclusively on matching older adults with the need in the community. So we definitely can continue to focus on that. And as you mentioned, the InterAges program has been around for over 30 years. It was started by a wonderful person named Austin Ammon. And the school system is has appropriated money to operate this program. So it's a joint partnership between MCPS and us. And we clearly want to continue to do more and better. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that. And one of my goals I've said is, and I want to work with my colleagues, Councilmember Rice and Navarro and others, we should have a relationship with any senior, with all of our schools that want one. We should be able to help them with the back end, background check, transportation, all the things so that can happen. So the other thing I'll say is just, and I think you mentioned this, and I've mentioned this to Dr. Gales, we have many in our senior population who are worried about, are alone in either facilities or assisted living, and might be sick, might be dealing with some issues, have great anxiety, and some are more or less comfortable with how to navigate the system of, if I need to get tested, how do I get there? We've set up some transportation options, but there's concern there. And I just want to flag that as something that I think we're going to be dealing with for a little while now, and probably going into the future, of how we assist those types of seniors who don't have care and are alone, but might need assistance, how we get them to the assistance they need.
So thank you, of course, especially those who are isolated. If you live in an assisted living facility, by definition, you are less isolated. You have staff around, obviously. And so the concern is to prioritize those folks who do live alone. And so that's, again, when a network of volunteers, village leaders or friendly neighbors to identify someone who is like this by themselves with no family around, no help, and then connect with us, do connect with our office and let us know, my neighbor, I'm concerned, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely, yeah. We would like to prioritize those folks who are isolated.
I appreciate it. And last thing I'll say is I'll end on a positive note. We have a great department. I think, to Councilmember Albornoz, I agree with you 100% on the need to expand the capacity and why, and that hiring freeze shouldn't apply. I personally have utilized the services of the aging when I was caring for my elderly and sick father. We've used the respite and other services, and just want to thank you and your team and Dr. Crowell. I've seen firsthand how great the work and important the work that you all do. So I'm a big supporter here, and thank you for everything that you're doing.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. And Odile, I'm going to be very brief. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and great to have a person who's got that special education background, who understands how disability oftentimes is tied with our aging, but also can serve on multiple fronts, especially when it comes to our children with disabilities and understanding what kind of a role our seniors can play in that aspect as well. So coupling with something that Councilmember Duando said, the great thing is that with our Kerwin Commission recommendations, we recognize that the intergenerational educational aspect was a key important factor. And so we've put a focus behind that. And as you said, we've had that established relationship that we want to continue to grow when it comes to that. But one of the things I'd really like to see us work on is how we can help to provide that respite for some of our parents who have children with disabilities, and engaging our senior population in some of those things as well, maybe in group settings, again, depending on the level of disability and those kinds of things. But certainly it's an untapped resource for us in so many different aspects that we've never really seen before. I know that you have the background to be able to think through those kinds of things and be innovative and creative in trying to address these kinds of situations. So I'm very excited. You come incredibly qualified. You know this county so well, and you've got the passion and the leadership capabilities to take this on. And so I'm just really happy to see someone like you taking the helm in this respect, and look forward to continuing to work with you. So thank you.
You are so welcome. And as you were talking, it reminds me of something I did moons ago. It was for families who had a child with severe disabilities, and they really needed a break, respite, so they can go to the dentist or whatever they needed to do. So we were able to organize a Saturday afternoon respite with volunteers. Of course, they had to be trained. And then we had a paid nurse on staff because we absolutely needed the medical presence. But that's something, from moons ago, and I haven't even thought about this until right now. So we can definitely think about that again. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benito. And as you know, we're going to be voting on you in a few moments. And I don't believe you should be very nervous at all. I think you're going to be just fine. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much for all your amazing support all these years to our community and to our families. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to legislative session day 14. And we have one item that we're voting on today, and that's the expedited bill 2320, contracts, management, and disposal of goods, emergency procedures. We need a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Navarro.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Reamer. Madam Clerk, I believe this is a roll call vote, please. Madam Clerk?
Sorry, it looks like we're both muted.
Well, you're on. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Duando?
Yes.
Mr. Duando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albanos?
Yes.
Mr. Albanos votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hugger?
Yes.
Mr. Hugger votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes.
The motion is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item that we have is an action item, and it's for the county executive's appointee as Chief of Aging and Disability in the Department of Health and Human Services in the name of Dr. Odile Brunetto and Councilmember Albornoz, please.
I would like to move that Dr. O'Neill Brunetto serve in official capacity as the Chief of Aging and Disabilities for the Department of Health and Human Services.
Second.
It's been seconded by, the motion was made by Councilmember Albornoz. It was seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Dr. Brunetto, congratulations and thank you. In fact, we can applaud maybe even, this might be the first time we've ever applauded remotely, but anyhow.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, that's right. This is the way to do it, right? Yeah. Thank you. All right. Next, we're in, hold on here. We have a proposed closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice pursuant to Maryland Code General Provisions, Article 3-305, subsection B, subsection 7, and to discuss potential litigation pursuant to the Maryland Code General Provisions, Article 3-305, subsection B, subsection 8. The topic is a pending contract dispute with a vendor. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Albernaz, and is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilmember Glass. All those in favor, please do so by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We are adjourned this meeting, and we will go into closed session.